All right, welcome back. This time we're going to be talking about designing gamification. And we're going to start with, unfortunately, what looks like a very scary slide called the kaleidoscope of effective gamification. This is an interesting graphic, and I'm going to try and break it down with you in a way that makes sense. It kind of like is looking at what is effective gamification and how do you build kind of game-like systems around that, and how do you think about that, right? So let's say we have at the core of our kaleidoscope, we have effective gamification. That's what we care about. And in our cases, effective gamification is helping internalize that motivation, right? Motivation to do whatever task we are gamifying. And so we think about what that is. Sorry, I'm going to look at this monitor because all my text is readable on this one. So there are a lot of layers to building gamification around a specific behavior, right? So effective gamification is all about getting that behavior to continue, right? And behavior is motivated by a lot of different factors that are intrinsic and extrinsic. And so if we start to build out our layers here, that's what this motivated behavior layer is all about. Those pieces of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation that are used to build towards this effective gamification that we want. And so how do we motivate behavior using game experiences? Well, if we look at the next layer, the game experience layer, we build those out through the actions that the players or users or whatever you want to call them might be doing, the challenges that they're presented with, and maybe achievements or other kinds of reward systems that we would provide through a game-like experience. And from there we say, okay, well, this is what the game experience is all about. This is how we're going to get that behavior motivated, which will in turn make our gamification effective. So, okay, what's the process that we use to provide that game experience? And we step out and we say, okay, this is now the game design process layer, where we actually are doing or thinking about how to use game design to dig deeper, build these game systems, and motivate behaviors. These are the rules and principles that we would design around that behavior, the mechanics that we would ask our players to interact with, the kinds of models and patterns of behavior that we are designing for, as well as the interface that players would be interacting with, if any. And as we build all these things out, what we're eventually building to is this kind of like upper layer of fun, right? We want our gamified experience to feel fun so that people will interact with it. And so you can see this model. This is really just two views of it, right? This circle here is kind of an overhead view, but if we turn that whole process on its side, we get something like this, where we see, we have the fun layer, but all of these things kind of funnel down to that idea of effective gamification. And what's really cool about this model and thinking about designing gamification in this way, or designing gamified processes in this way, is that, as you can see on the diagram here, we as designers are building outwards. So we start with what we want, or what our definition of effective gamification is. So that's like the first thing that we care about. What's our purpose? The second thing we care about is how do we motivate the behavior that we're after, right? And from that, we say, okay, we have a behavior. How do we build a game or a game-like system around this behavior? Oh, Sorry, for some reason PowerPoint does this. Don't know why. But just pretend my number 3 drew correctly. 3. I'll leave that there. It's fine. You can pretend. But yeah, so we think about, okay, well, what is this? How do we build a compelling game-like experience out of this behavior? And then we go through the design process, as you would when you're designing any game, and say, okay, well, how do we make this fun, make this interesting? And then at the end of the day, we have up here for number 5, what is hopefully, a perceived layer of fun. And I'll clean this up. And I think like that makes sense, right? As a designer, this is kind of the process that you would take when you're thinking about fun anyway. But on the other side of things, we can also use this model to look at how a player is going to experience your gamification as well, right? Because you want the player to perceive some kind of fun in your behavior, and they perceive that fun by interacting with the game design processes that you've designed. They, sorry, I lost my train of thought. They perceive the fun through the game design aspects that you've incorporated, which gives them a game-like experience. And through that game-like experience, they are doing this behavior that you were trying to motivate. And over time, through continually interacting with this, they can achieve whatever you've decided your goal of effective gamification is. So it's fascinating in a lot of ways. We're going to ignore the number 3s here, and we're just going to move on. So that's, again, a high-level look at one way of designing a gamified process. And so in this neighborhood of things we think about and how we design gamification, it's really easy to think about, okay, well, the best way to make something more like a game is to put points on it, or put achievements on it, or give people an opportunity to compare and like say, okay, I have more points than this person, so I must be doing better at whatever this thing is. And that is certainly functional. I've forgotten this slide. That's certainly functional. It's what's kind of been called BLAP gamification, badges, leaderboards, achievements, points, because those are kind of like common things that you would kind of generally think about and go, okay, well, that's how you make something a game, is you just put achievements on it, you put points on it, whatever. And it certainly is the easiest way of implementing gamification, as evidenced here in the fact that we've got our business meeting, and our businessman Dave here is getting some kind of recognition from his boss. Just slap some points on there. People love earning points, and they do to a point. But there's a danger with this kind of process as well, right? Often it will take more than that, or it will take something different. Consider this business scenario, for example. Let's say that our boss here has decided to gamify his business. And so, great thinking, Dave. But instead of giving a raise, you'll get some business bugs. That's, just like it's the point system within our company hierarchy. And in this case, our friend Dave here becomes very sad because he's now missing out on some, more tangible monetary reward. Now, you can certainly gamify the workplace, but it's not as simple as just slapping some points or some business bucks on something. And so if you're thinking about designing gamification in the future, keep this in mind, right? BLAP, badges, leaderboards, achievements, points, is certainly the easiest way to implement gamification in any process, but it's also the least effective method of gamification. It's quite lazy because it takes a very reductive view of what games and game systems are. And just by the nature of it, the reward systems, the points, the badges, aren't inherently very deep, and they're not really well thought out. And so through this, those reward systems are meaningful in a way, but they don't help the user or the player actually internalize those motivations and start doing whatever behavior you're gamifying because they want to. It's always just because it's a rewarded behavior. And then, of course, you take away the reward, and the behavior will stop happening. So it's something that you really have to be careful with, because poorly implemented gamification can actually cause users to stop doing the thing that you're gamifying. And again, you can kind of go back to what we've talked about with rewards and all the things that you've read and learned about reward systems. And think about that. I guess I've kind of spoiled it a little bit too early, but what happens when you stop rewarding someone for doing something? Oftentimes they'll simply stop doing it. If work is a great example here. You go to work because you're earning a paycheck, and that's going to help you sustain and live. If your boss comes to you and says, hey, it's we're just going to stop paying you, thanks, but keep doing what you're doing, there's no way that that's going to happen. You're not going to work anymore. You're like, okay, well, what am I getting out of this? So by taking that reward away, you're also taking away, if not a certainty that the behavior will occur, you're certainly taking away a large likelihood that that behavior is going to continue. So thanks for, again, a brief look at things to think about when you're designing gamified processes. The final video is next. We'll talk about effective gamification, and we'll go through a couple examples. So I will see you then.